Teachers of Reddit, what's the saddest thing you've ever found out about a student? I taught preschool, 3-year-olds. I got a new student who was in her grandparents' care because she had been raped by her mother's boyfriend. She had all kinds of issues, obviously, because she didn't know how to comprehend what happened to her and how to deal with it. She was so damn smart, and funny, and great, but at the same time had violent outbursts. Hearing a 3-year-old try to describe sex acts that happened to her was one of the most devastating experiences of my life. I had a student that I taught in 7th grade and he was my friend's, the librarian, student 8 in 8th grade who had horrible hygiene, and he was often bullied for it. For his birthday we decided to create a shaving kit for him. We filled it with cologne, soaps, a razor and other items. We ordered a pizza and we decorated, closed the library and had a small party to celebrate him. When he opened his gift he started to cry. At first we thought it was happiness, but it quickly escalated to sobs. We thought we offended him and began to apologize. Through his sobs we finally made out. I thought it would make him stop. We looked at each other and gently asked what he meant. Slowly the story emerged that his father had been sexually abusing him since he was 5 and he thought if he made himself as gross as possible his dad would stop. By law we had to call Child Protective Services and we explained that to him. As I went to do that my friend tried to console him. As it was his birthday his mom showed up to pick him up early, arriving just after CPS. The caseworker let her in the room and the first words she said were, "Couldn't you just hold on for 3 more months?" It seemed she knew what was happening and was getting her LPN so they could move out. She had not worked before. This sad story does have a happy-ish ending. CPS in conjunction with our school social worker found them a shelter so they could stay together. The father was convicted and sent to prison where he was eventually stabbed to death. I should have explained that mom was regularly beaten and told that she and son would be killed if they tried to leave. I am not in any way excusing her behavior, just putting in the context. Edit spelling. Edit 2 explanation. 7th grade student lost an older brother to a drive-by. After a few months I was told they had lost 2 other siblings the same way a few years earlier in elementary school. 3 years down the line and his name was in the local newspaper for killing an 11th grade boy for his gang. That year I had the 11th grade boy's little sister in my class. One 6th grader told me his father killed his puppy by putting it in the dryer. Another student was living in a 4-man tent with her mother and 2 dogs for months. They put it in a hole with chicken wire around it to keep the dogs from getting out. They ended up going through Hurricane Irene like that. I currently have another 6th grader in need of a place to live because his mom is a drug addict who can't take care of him. She also blames him for DCF investigating because he mentioned his home life to his therapist. Work in a high poverty region. Learned one of my special ed kids was raped by her mom's boyfriend while the mom held her still. The reasoning was to get her pregnant since she was almost 18 so she could draw a check. I had a very smart kid failing my class because he wasn't turning in any homework. When I asked him why he told me he lived in a hotel room with 12 other people, there wasn't space, and it was too loud for him to focus. I had a student, 16, who would stay after school with me on Fridays and offer to help out in my classroom. She wasn't a particularly good student and didn't seem to like me, so I never understood why she stuck around. The following school year, her mother got arrested for prostituting her 3 daughters, including this student. I wish she had said something or I had thought to ask questions. I teach 4th grade and 2 years ago, the students at our school read enough books to spin this reward wheel that we have. It landed on Eat Fried Worms. I embrace my role as the young popular teacher, so of course I ate a giant, live worm in front of the whole school. After that, this little girl used to stop me at lunch and she would just say in a super disgusted voice, You ate a worm." So after that I started going up to her each day at lunch and looking at her food and asking her where the worms were and we would bicker back and forth. This continued into last year and one day we got done with our routine and one of the paraprofessionals stopped me and thanked me. She told me that student had been molested on multiple occasions by her mom's various boyfriends. She said that she never saw the girl smile as much as she did when we talked about worms together for that brief moment each day. I broke down outside the cafeteria after she told me that. I just hate to believe that someone could do something so awful to a kid. She told me she wanted to be in my class when she got to 4th grade and I hoped she would be. She moved at the end of last year. I never even knew her name and that's what kills me. I wish I would have asked her name. My mom is a public school teacher. She has told me some super sad stories about her students, at least 3 a year. One kid had some disease where he had really brittle bones. He was in a wheelchair. She said it would break her heart because he would say that he just wanted to be a normal boy, to run and play like the other boys. She has a little girl in her class this year. Her mother was a drug addict. Her father was trying to break the mom of her addiction by, I guess, locking her up in a room. While the drug dealer showed up to get his money, the dad answered the door. Him and the dealer started arguing. He shot her dad while the little girl was holding his hand. It seems like every year she has super sad stories. Teacher here. I work with emotionally disturbed teens. Last year was my first year and I had one female student who was the first kid in her family to graduate from high school. Sweet girl, smart, and always worked hard. I worked hard to get her into college on a full ride. She had a lot of demons in her life. Mom is a drug user, sister was as well, and she was dating an abusive boyfriend. About 3 months before the end of the school year, she disappeared. Mom left a voicemail, while very high, saying she hasn't seen her in a few weeks. I somehow get a hold of her on the phone and she was whispering. Her boyfriend in the background was screaming at her. She told me she wasn't coming back. About a week later, the police showed up to my class asking when we last saw her, if we had any recent photos. They can't say why, but Mom was as high as a kite. I get a call later that night asking if I could come down to the station and identify her because Mom is refusing. She was beaten to death by her boyfriend, to the point she was barely recognizable. I threw up in the trash can after seeing a photo of her. She was 17 and killed by her boyfriend, who left her body on the side of the road. Mom died a few days later and no one was left to bury her. It was a reality check working with her. So bright and had a future, but she was a victim of her environment. When I taught second grade, I had a student who walked kind of funny. It took me about a week to realize that it was because his shoes were too small. I got him some new shoes at Kmart because kid shoes are cheap. I told him it was so he would be able to run really fast in gym class. I found out he was living with his grandma because his dad was in prison for killing his mom. I started buying him clothes after that. At the end of the school year, I was packing up some boxes and one of them said snacks. The boy looked at me with great big eyes and asked if I really had snakes in the box. I cried over the fact that I promoted a kid to third grade who really couldn't read. Not a teacher, but I volunteered in an after-school program that toured kids. My group was 1,415 years old. So, I have this extremely bright kid in my group. When we talk about anything else, it was clear that he was super smart. When we did homework together, he was doing great, and understood everything perfectly. He even helped the other kids. However, he would fail every single one of his tests. And not just a few mistakes here and there, on a few subjects. No. He totally completely failing every classes. It didn't make sense at all, so there had to be something else going on. I talked to my supervisor about it, and he promised me to look into it. Turn out his older brother had been held back and they were in the same classes. The father would beat up the younger one every time he had better marks than his older brother, because Yo was making the true heir look bad. Another student was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a disease wherein the muscles turn to jelly from the legs up. People with this disease live up to about only their teen years, up until their breathing muscles hold out. He was 7 then. One student I treated had bone cancer. He had his leg amputated, and that's why I was teaching him exercises for his stump and prepping him for his new leg. He said he wanted to be a meteorologist. 2 years ago I found out that another tumor grew on him, but that time, on his head. He died shortly after that. We had a student get adopted by a great aunt. CPS had found the girl when she was 5 locked in a closet with one older brother and one younger brother. She was always so sad or insanely angry. She was often nonverbal. Eventually, we figured out that there had been a younger sister who had died in the closet. CPS and the aunt confirmed the story. When the littlest one was born, the girl I knew had done her best to take care of the baby. But baby just couldn't drink that Kool-Aid. I'm not the teacher, I'm the kid. When I was a kid I was abused. A few teachers would realize it. Anyways, I never had lunch at school, and I didn't qualify for free lunch because my mom didn't care enough to make sure I ate. I was probably one of the skinniest, least nourished kids in the school. A teacher found out that my mom just wouldn't give me lunch and food at home was scarce, so she bought me lunch every day I was at school for 2 years. I looked like the Home Alone kid, so the way I repaid her was to do the aftershave scream face to make her laugh. She said laughter was a form of payment, since I refused to take free food she had paid for. I found out she was used as a human shield when her father was arrested for murdering her mother. 7 years old. That the reason that my grade 12 student was falling asleep during math class was because he was working 40 hours a week to pay his parents' bills. I saw his pay stub. He was a great kid too. This was several years ago. When I was still new to classroom teaching, I noticed a boy in my class was extremely quiet and reserved, despite my efforts to engage him. He rarely spoke in class and, while he had a few friends, never seemed to be as demonstrative or exuberant as the other kids his age even during play. I knew he had a younger brother, so one morning I asked his brother's teacher what he was like. She grimaced. Oh geez, she said, I'm sorry you hadn't heard about them. She then told me about how the boy's father had been a drunken abuser. And about the day the mother threatened to leave and take the boy and his brother with her. And how the dad then dragged them all into their front yard and blew the mother's head off with a shotgun before doing the same to himself. Right in front of the kids. The oldest was in first grade at the time and had to make the 911 call. Never had a kid with a worse story before or since. One of my students got diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma cancer at the age of 5. Through his bones and all. His mother was a single mother and he is the only child. After a year and a half of heavy chemotherapy and non-stop hospital stays, he is finally cancer-free. Still going for radiation every couple weeks or so. Whenever I'm feeling down about the little things, I think of what this 5-year-old boy and his mother had been through and are still going through. I had a student who lived at the homeless shelter. She was an A student, super nice kid, and had a baby. Her mom came into the shelter drunk and got them all kicked out. Another student, also an A student and just the nicest person, told us that she couldn't go to her senior prom because her mom couldn't pay the electric bill. So all of her money that she worked for had to go to paying bills instead of a dress. The teachers pitched in and helped her go, because if anyone deserved a nice prom, it was her. A student disappeared for a few weeks. I found out later she tried to kill herself. Her mother's boyfriend had been raping her every night for years. She never came back to school. I was a teacher's aide in high school for the special ed kids. One of the adult aides confessed to us that one of our students' mothers couldn't handle that her kid wasn't acting like most boys his age, aka that he wasn't trying to get in girls' pants. The mom was evidently calling hookers for her son, and when they'd show up she'd help him touch them. To my knowledge CPS was called, no idea how it ended. Edited cause people want more info. The kid was probably 15, a sophomore. I think it was 10 years ago, and he was severely mentally disabled. Enough that he needed his diapers changed, was nonverbal, and pretty much couldn't move at all unassisted. Please excuse my lack of tact. I shouldn't have even posted this. Anyway, facts are in this case that what the parent was doing was wrong, seeing as how the kid was not able to consent in any way. I had this student, Miles, who was a real trial. He started out very smarmy and attention needy, and as a new teacher in a difficult class I struggled to give it to him, so he acted out probably for attention from me or his peers. He was in 7th grade and alternated between acting extremely mature, talking about sex, cursing, acting like a little gangster, and being very immature compared to his peers. He'd draw little kid cartoons, discuss Santa, and beg to do classroom chores. What he didn't do was work. When I held my first parent-teacher conference, it all became clear. His grandma who raised him had died last year, and his mom was in and out of jail. His dad was only allowed supervised visits and flaked out a lot. His guardian was an elderly lady who had agreed to take care of Miles and his brother until the mom got out of prison. Mom never showed up and didn't want either boy. The guardian has recently been diagnosed with cancer and didn't have the energy to control or handle a hurt, grieving middle schooler. She said things such as, "I'm old and sick, I wasn't supposed to be raising him. If it weren't for his grandma, I would wash my hands. He's no good and I can't do anything for him. If I'm not doing right by him, take him, this is all I can do." It was eye-opening and sad. I wish I could say that I saved Miles or that I changed his life. When he was sent to another school, our school was grade-based, he came up and hugged me and thanked me, the teacher he gave hell to every day, and it felt like a minor victory. Honestly though, it wasn't good enough. I couldn't do enough. I am no longer a teacher, and this is a big reason why. My feelings of inadequacy,